It started off with our mate Brundle and Senna in '83, and it carried on. So I desperately wanted to win that. So to win it with Johnny Herbert, I needed Anne, who was not married to Mark at the time. In fact, I'm not even sure they knew each other at the time.
No, we didn't,
because
mate.
I don't think Mark was actually in the country. He didn't come
He was
till the
still at
early
school.
90s.
I was young, mate.
He was in kindergarten.
No, I was not in kindergarten.
He was wrestling kangaroos. Hello and welcome to Formula for Success. I'm David Coulthard, and joining me is a man who thinks he knows his way around a drum kit. It's Eddie Jordan.
Drum kits, not coming to mind at the moment, but anyway, I'll take that, DC. Any compliment coming from you is a privilege, I have to say. It doesn't often happen.
Well, you're a man that I've seen play with the spoons many, many times, and thankfully it's only the spoons, but you can actually keep a really good beat.
You're only saying that because you know you can't. And actually, you're hopeless. When you were on stage with Charlene Spiteri, another wonderful Scottish girl, and Texas, I thought you were devoid of any kind of tempo in your body, and I'm now convinced of it, so don't worry about it.
Well, EJ, all I can say is the hips don't lie. That's where I've got the timing, my friend. Right, we were blessed to have Mark Webber on FFS to dissect the drama of the Italian Grand Prix in Monza. And lucky for us, he's agreed to come back so we can talk more about his fabulous motor racing career. Mark, sorry you had to endure Eddie's growl again. We tried to remove it, but our anchors voted to keep it. But putting that to one side, how the devil are you?
I am brilliant, absolutely brilliant, mate. And I don't do many podcasts. But you guys have done 80, I believe, and I'm happy to sit with you two lunatics and talk about all things that have happened in our motorsport career, including, sounds like you're going to talk about me a little bit, which is...
It's all about you. It's all about you. So before...
Yeah. No, it won't
EJ...
be. It will not all be about me because the other guy was involved. So he will...
Who is that then?
That's you.
Oh,
well, should we
me?
get into that? Should we
Yeah.
actually ask EJ a question before we get into talking about your career? Because it was touched on the Monza review where Eddie gave a shout out to your lovely wife who has been involved in motorsport as a manager, involved in the media side, helped guide your career through the Piranha Club, as Eddie, I think, famously called it. So let's have a shout out for Annie. And actually... EJ, your memories of first working with her, which helped you win one of your first titles in the lower formula.
British Formula 3, for me, was the greatest championship, and possibly, except for this particular Formula 1 season, I think Formula 3 in Britain was just electric. It was absolutely brilliant. It started off with our mate Brundle and Senna in '83, and it carried on. So I desperately wanted to win that. So to win it with Johnny Herbert, I needed Anne, who was not married to Mark at the time. In fact, I'm not even sure they knew each other at the time.
No, we didn't,
because
mate.
I don't think Mark was actually in the country. He didn't come till the early 90s.
I was young, mate.
He was in kindergarten.
No, I was not in kindergarten.
He was wrestling
fuck off and
kangaroos.
just listen. So the reality is that here was a girl that I really hadn't come across many girl managers, and I promise you, she was so gentle, so clean, so clear. Nothing was murky. Everything was factual, and to this day, that's why I say the nicest and the best things that I possibly can say about your wife, Mark, because that's exactly what she is. She is a gem of a girl.
Thanks, mate.
And as Johnny Herbert will tell you, that I don't think Johnny could have had any better people looking after him. There was no aggro. Very seldom do you have a manager that you don't have a cross word with from time to time about their driver, because managers are like fathers, aren't they? They all think their own driver does no wrong. But Annie, or Anne, whichever you care to call her, she was magic, very understanding, knew clearly the professionalism that was going on, and I have the height of regard for her, I must tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely, lovely soul. Now, Mark, we've had the conversation several times about our journey. My journey from Scotland seemed like a long way. Every night from after school on a Friday, heading down south, hours and hours in the car, racing. And then if you had a result, you celebrated it on the way home. If you didn't, it was a painful reflection on what could have been. Now, you first came to the UK in '96. Give us a little sort of brief synopsis of you're back in Australia, you're there with your family watching Formula One, you're doing a bit of karting.
Yeah.
Where did you get the belief? Was it coming from the family, or were you rattling their cage all the time?
Yeah, like I did some karting in Australia. I was always reasonably tall for my age, so karting was a little bit of a challenge for me in terms of the weight categories, etc. Then I went into cars, and it actually started to come a little bit easier for me, the results. So bit of Formula Ford in Australia, and I was just, mate, it was a total disease for me. I was watching Formula One, I taped the races, I was constantly watching them back. I was getting Autosport magazine down there, which, by the way, I think was still coming on a boat, which arrived 3 weeks after the bloody results happened. So, apart from the top shelf sometimes at newsagents, I was trying to find Autosport in the other shelves. But ultimately, I just had this severe passion, mate, for an addiction for racing overseas, and that was through my father. My dad he loved single-seater racing. He used to hitchhike to go and watch Sir Jack Brabham and Jimmy Clark, all the guys race at Warwick Farm in Australia, which was a few hour hitchhike for him to go and do that. So I think early on, because touring cars are so big in Australia, he was didn't want me to watch touring. I watched touring cars obviously, but he said, the best drivers in the world are racing single-seaters. So I think it was just thrust upon me from an early age that that's the journey I want to try and follow. I did come to Europe. I had a test at the end of 95. Sorry, I did the Formula Ford Festival in 95. I finished third in that in my first race in Europe. And then Ralph Furman, who was the Van Diemen, owner at the time and constructor of all those beautiful little Formula Ford cars we used to race. And you raced those two DC, didn't you, mate? The Van Diemens. I came back in 96 and was a factory driver for there. So, but once you leave, mate, and it's actually a line from Mick Doohan, our friend, it's a fucking long way home with your tail between your legs if you get it wrong, so it's really, you got to try and convert. So for me, I knew I had an opportunity. I didn't really want to have too many plan Bs because I wanted to make plan A work. And I did that with Formula Ford with some moderate success and winning the festival at the end of that year. And I never really wanted to go back because I saw that as, like you could say a failure, but I just wanted to make sure I stayed over here and converted that talent I believe that I had.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. You got some great support along the way. Once those initial successes are coming in, what point was it for you that you were going, hold on, this isn't just me sort of laying the foundations. I can see a route to Formula One, because I kind of always felt that racing was a hobby until the point when I was given the test drive at Williams, and that was in the penny drop when I went, actually, I can earn money out of this, and I could be a professional. Yeah,
100%, mate. I think that for me, it was around 97 in the Formula 3 year where I was going from. Even though in Formula Ford I didn't bring much money at all, I had to, the whole budget was £75,000 for, which is a lot of money, but like compared to current terms, it's not a lot of money. Duckham's paid half of my salary, and Yellow Pages in Australia paid the other half, with the Aussie peso by the way, it was 33 bloody p to the dollar back then. So, Australian dollars were not going far in terms of my sponsorship. So, but when I had won the Formula 3 race at Brands Hatch in the fourth race, Norbert Haag rang me up from Mercedes and said, I think there was a weird, talk about sliding doors moments, which you and all of us, EJ and yourself, we've been in this situation where there's just timing in life where I think that Gerhard Berger's father had been ill, or something happened with Gerhard where Alex Wirtz had to replace him in a sports car.
Yeah, he had a sinus.
That's right.
He missed a few races for a sinus operation.
Yeah, and then like Norbert's like, we haven't got Alex Wirtz in the sports car. We need a replacement for Alex Wirtz. And then Norbert rang me and said, do you want to do this race at Nürburgring? And I'm like, with Bernd Schneider, a 1,000K race. I'm like, Norbert, I was only racing Formula Ford 6 months ago. And I said, no. I said, I think that is really going to be a step.
That's brave.
A step far from it. But I want to test. I want to show you what I can do. Please let me test the car, which I did test the car. And they took Roberto Moreno, actually, who drove for you, EJ, didn't he? Roberto drove for you.
Absolutely,
Yeah, so Roberto Moreno did replace Alex Wurz in that car. So I didn't do that race. So to your answer your question, DC, that's when I started to believe I'm now getting
Phone calls.
a chance, and people are believing in what I'm doing, and manufacturers, because as we know, manufacturers at that time, as a young driver, that's actually what you need to try, and especially for me, I had no real sponsorship. So I did the test. Mercedes, I was underway with there to start driving for them in the future. But also in your question, DC, you said to Formula One. I still harboured big dreams of that, but sports car was a real segue. Like, shit, actually, it's off-piste here.
Yeah, sports cars was big business back those days.
It was big, but I thought, shit, with the roof over my head, this is not what I had in mind. Yeah. I still think I've got to get myself back out of this at some point. And it was a brilliant experience, but that's when I started to believe, okay, this is now getting serious for my career, my momentum, and the belief is starting to get real.
So at what point did the fellow Aussie Paul Stoddart come into your business? He was, always a motorsports fan. He made his money through aviation. I believe he still does. And he obviously saw something in you as well. And it probably helped the fact you were fellow Aussie. So how instrumental was he? And I think it was around your sort of Formula 3000 year that EJ claims that he has some sort of involvement in your...
EJ did. He did, because, through my Mercedes sports car days, that program ran out of puff because we had horrendous accidents in Le Mans. And, and to this day, if and I had 2 flips and we were very lucky, my teammate also flipped. I think to this day, we might not have even had, and Bernd Schneider said this, we might not have even had Lewis Hamilton on the grid, because Mercedes at the time, if a car went into the crowd or we had something really, really tricky happen, Mercedes would have been in the spotlight for
like they'd been back
decisions.
In the day.
That's right.
In the 50s at Le Mans, they pulled out a motorsport.
Horrendous accident. And I think that as a manufacturer, that was a tricky... They pulled out of sports cars because we had no real, no fatalities, thank God. But that was interesting. So they contained it within that category. So I was back into unemployed, didn't have a pot to piss in again. I was paid 200,000 German marks to drive for Mercedes, which was, and I had to pay people back from getting me to the situation I was in the junior categories. I was still well behind.
What was that in
God knows, mate. Is that 50 sterling?
Is it really?
For a season?
Yeah.
So I think that, and I might be wrong on that, but it got us going, but it wasn't exactly paying back the big bills that got me into that situation to start with. But I was going to Silverstone to Jordan Grand Prix to train. And when I was unemployed, I would go to the gym, and Eddie would let me go there, and often I was trying to harass him about putting, I want to do some straight line testing in the car. Can I do some aerodynamic work? And it was always tricky for him, obviously, because he had, the people, that was a very commercial role for his drivers. He had his race drivers, but obviously having a test driver, I'd imagine that, and EJ can throw some more light on that. But I didn't have the economic firepower to trouble the scorers with EJ's commercial model. So it was me going to the gym, having a chance. And then one day, I think I even followed bloody EJ out of the factory because he wouldn't answer the freaking phone. Giselle, was it Giselle, EJ, your old PA? Giselle was amazing.
We had her on the program.
Phenomenal. She was so good. She was so good at saying, fuck off. She was brilliant at saying no.
In an elegant way.
Yeah, exactly. She was amazing. So it was like, this is my opportunity. I want to try and get some straight line testing, whatever. EJ said, there's a guy over the road testing today, and his name's Paul Stoddart. Go and see him. Let's have a look at that. And then that was made my career, because without that advice from EJ, I would never have gone to see, because I didn't know Paul Stoddart. I didn't know he was over there. Loves his racing. And Stoddy then believed in me. He put a lot of money in my career instantaneously. Let's have a go. He tested me, of course, which went well. And after that, I'm back in single-seaters. I've got a team. By the way, it was a struggling team that I joined, but I had then good results, and then off we went. So sliding doors, trust and instinct from EJ. I then got an opportunity. The stopwatch went okay. off we go.
It's incredible, EJ, isn't it? And you've seen this so many times in your journey as a driver, a team owner, and then ultimately a team principal and owner in Formula One, where just one little twist of fate can create an opportunity. I'm thinking Schumacher when in Spa, when he got put in the car, he was looking like he was a coming man, but he was also looking just in a mix with Heinz Harald and Karl Wendlinger.
Yeah.
But that created opportunity. So this little meeting with Stoddy and then getting into Formula 3000 in a team that hadn't been recognised, winning races, that put you in the spotlight of getting that chance to drive for Minardi in F1. And I want to then fast forward it because we could get into all of the wonderful events before that. But that first Grand Prix, you qualify 18th, but you score points. You're being harassed, I think, by, was it Salo in a Toyota?
Yeah.
At the end of the Grand Prix, you get your elbows out you get that vital points for the team.
I raced in Formula 3000, which is Formula 2 now. I did that for a few years, and I was then Benetton test driver. That was very important for me. I was doing some test work, and back then, as you know, mate, test drivers, we did quite a bit of mileage, which is brilliant in terms of experience to get the job done when you finally arrive. And even that was a last-minute deal. I had no, Minardi, it was back then. I mean, they had for the viewers listening, back then they had a 107% rule where if you were too slow in qualifying, you were out of the bloody race. You didn't even start the frigging thing, So that was like the team was that, we're on the bubble for that scenario to unfold, which was not exactly comfortable for everyone to travel around the world. It's like both cars are going home. Thankfully, I never, copped the sword at any point on that. My teammate did, but it was like so the team were struggling. But the first Grand Prix, the longest consecutive laps I did in testing, we did 2 tests before we went to Melbourne. The longest run I did was 17 laps before the car broke. So it was...
And you're entering a 60-something lap Grand Prix.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't 58 laps, and it was... So the preparation was horrendous. But off we went, and Ralph Schumacher did 10-pin bowling at the first corner and T-boned everyone, probably you included, mate.
I think I got away with the first
corner. Leave Ralph alone. He's a lovely fella.
No,
leave him alone.
He is. No, he is.
You pair of tossers.
This was a brilliant... And for the life of me to this day, EJ, it's in Australia. I do not know how that race was not red flagged. It was just carnage at turn 1. Yeah. It was absolute carnage. And I rolled around like whatever. I come out like 9th or 10th or whatever. And as the race went on, there was a few more retirements, and I'm like, I would see Michael every 20 laps because he's just lapping me like he's obviously on fire out front. And I'm like, shit, the pit board's like, because Stoddy said to me before the race, just want you to finish, mate. It'd be a dream for me. If you get this bloody thing home, it'd be a dream for me. And then when I went from, 8th, 20 minutes later, 7th, another one's retired. Get in there. I'm in the bloody points now. Old points, mate. Real currency, EJ. Wasn't it, bang? In top 6.
You had to fight hard to get them points.
Yeah. And I was in P5, and then Salo's arriving on me with a few laps to go, and Stoddy come on the radio said, under no circumstances should you let him pass. So he was very keen for me to stay ahead of him, obviously. And I was very relaxed. I thought when Mick arrives, I'm ready for this. Let's see how we go. And ultimately held him off. He had a spin, and the crowd went ballistic. And I had a 2-race contract. And Stoddy said to me that night, mate, you're in for the rest of the season because the value you've now brought us, it was obviously a total fluke.
You got to be in it to win it, though.
Yeah, mate. I had a 2. I was literally had you could, if you break it down, I had a 2-week contract because Malaysia was a week after. So that was my F1 career probably over. But I got 5th. So lucky again. I've had so much luck, mate. So much luck.
No, that's unfair. Mark, you make your own luck, number 1. And actually, Gary Player, great golfer, by the way, major winner. He always said, and he was the one who epitomizes this, he said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. And, it's such a great statement.
Yeah.
Mark, you can say, I can promise you, I always look in the mirror and I say, nobody in this world has been luckier than me. And so
there's a matter of crack when you look in it.
It's how you approach it. You feel you're very lucky. DC is a bit big-headed. He probably doesn't. He thinks it's, oh, me, why me, why me? But in my case, I am the luckiest person that's ever lived. That's a fact. But listen, Mark, just one thing I want to say. I was there for that race. And I don't know how you finished 5th. And sometimes in DC will have the one that he thinks about was the biggest miracle of all time. For me, Spa was the biggest miracle of all time for me. But I think Australia for you in your first
You're right,
race in
mate.
the Minardi
You're
is
right, mate. Absolutely, mate.
way and by far the biggest miracle you had.
Absolutely, mate. I mean, the diff failed. The diff was gone. It's wheel spin galore kicking off on the exits of the corners. And we come in for the first pit stop, mate, and the fuel flap wouldn't open. Couldn't put fuel in the car.
Okay.
There was some issue with the bloody pit limiter linked to and your old buddy, mate, and bless him, John Boy Walton, on the pit wall. I think he came up with something. Again, just an old racer, been in the trenches. Bless all the Italian. I mean, they were the passion and enthusiasm for all the Italian mechanics. I love all those boys, and I'm still close to them now. They could not think how they're going to get this thing open. They just could not. We'd still be there now, mate, trying to open it.
John Boy did.
John Boy did. Something with it, just pit limiter on or off or whatever. Just he cracked the code, cool as you like. We got fuel, we got some motion lotion, got it going again. And you couldn't make it up. Because we hadn't done a bloody pit stop practice.
You can't beat the paddies, Mark. You can't beat the paddies.
Mate, not bad. I must say, mate, every now and again you boys step up.
I remember, obviously I was in my own particular battle that day, but I remember afterwards we'd had the main podium ceremony, the music had stopped, and normally the crowd start to sort of slowly disappear and go about the business. But there was a second podium, and it was Paul and yourself went up there.
I wasn't happy about that because Ron Walker, again, bless him, Ron was like...
he used to be the promoter of the Australian Grand Prix.
Yeah, that's right, chairman and the promoter of Victoria Major Events. And Stoddy and him, and he said, we're going to the podium. I said, well, I'm not going to. I want to see the people, of course, the fans, but I do not want to. I want to get a podium one day for real. This is a big thing. And Ron said, with Bernie also, because they've asked him, Bernie's like, he agrees. So that the three big dog, or team boss, obviously, Stoddy was, of course, he was going. But
Stoddy's not shy, is he?
He's going. But Ron, and the promoter, and obviously Bernie at the time, owning F1, they had said, it's happening. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm a passenger here. Up we go.
And the crowd were there cheering like you'd won the race.
I'd take it to my grave, mate. Never forget, it was literally so surreal. It was, as EJ said, it was like a dream. It was just like, when they say those pinch me moments, like how the hell is this happening? As a young kid growing up a bit of a farm and you're like, to commentate to myself on a dirt bike or whatever, these dreamy, fluky scenarios that might happen in the future, that was a total dream.
Yeah. Well, guys, look, I'm going to make a decision right here and now, and Mark's right beside me, so he's in no position to say no. We've got so much great content that we're going to go through. I think we're going to have to split these episodes. So, Mark, first of all, you'll be coming back to do round 2.
I'm more than happy. We've got a lot more to go through.
Excellent. And that's going to bring us up through the battles that you had for the World Championship. But before we get there, a few minutes just wrapping up an amazing debut into Formula One. And then, very quickly, you're now on the shopping list of the other teams. And from Minardi, you find yourself going to Jaguar. So talk us through that transition. How supportive was Paul? Was it starting to get a little bit, had you started to pay off your debts by this point, or were you still indebted?
Yeah, no, it's a good point, mate. And that was part of, Flavio was looking after me at the time. He was close to Nicky Lauda, bless him. Nicky was at Jaguar at the time. And between Stoddy, Nicky and Flavio, whatever they did, I could move. So that was good.
So money must have changed hands. Stoddy is a bit like EJ. He'd be like, I won't keep Mark, but you have to give me a little present.
So I was obviously...
DC, you love this, don't you? You love getting in under the skin about the few quid. You're just such a miser. That's the problem with you.
Did you... Stoddy must have got paid something for you to be released.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And he deserved it too.
Yes.
He deserved it.
So, and then, mate, then I was testing with Jaguar.
Mark, you've never, because DC, he just omitted to ask you this because he knows the answer. Come on, DC, ask Mark how much did EJ get paid for the introduction to Paul Stoddart? That's the question.
How much did EJ get paid for the introduction?
I think, was it 18 million, EJ?
To an Isle of Man
I love
account.
your monopoly money. There are times, not for you, DC, but there are times for real friends I do things for free.
Oh,
God,
that's cutting.
That hurt, didn't it? Just as well you're not in the same room as me, EJ. Otherwise, I might need to.
Well, I knew you wouldn't buy me a pint. You didn't even invite me to be in that studio with you.
DC
Christ.
said he wanted to rip your Velcro off, mate, off your chin. That
Yeah,
Velcro. Take the Velcro off.
Actually, it reminds me of an Australian moment when I was racing for Red Bull, and Toro Rosso had Scott Speed, one of the best names for a Formula One driver. And there was a slight issue after the race over whether he'd overtaken under a yellow flag, which obviously I'd let everybody know he had. And it was for a point, so it was important. And we're in the stewards meeting afterwards, and Scott, in front of his team principal at Toro Rosso, in front of Jonathan Wheatley, who was the team manager at Red Bull, who will be heading off to Audi next year, Scott said something that touched a nerve with me, and I leant over the table and hit the hat from his head. and there was a moment of silence where Jonathan Wheatley goes, he thought, my God, this is my first race as team manager, and I've just had my driver hit another driver. And anyway, it made me think exactly what I'd do to that headset, EJ, if you and I were in the same room. I'd slap it off your head for accusing me of being tight.
You weren't so brave against Michael Schumacher, were you? You kept your helmet on. You're not stupid.
No, Michael was pretty fit. He was strong. Right, gentlemen, bringing it back to Mark Webber's amazing career. Mark, just give us a little journey into Jaguar, and then we're going to wrap this particular episode up.
Yeah, Jaguar, polar opposites to Minardi, works team, UK based, very British, very corporate. Minardi was a little startup, effectively, with a bit of a old French engine, the Asia Tech or Peugeot engine, which was weird in terms of and then Italian mechanics and Stoddart, Australian team boss, so real hybrid. This was very British, and they were trying, under the guidership of Ford, with Ford engines as well. They were trying to Cosworth, who were doing the engines, they were trying to get themselves back to the front. Off the back of Eddie Irvine was there, Pedro De La Rosa. They'd had a few years of trying to get themselves into a competitive position. But as we know, the juggernaut of F1, whatever you got above the door, you've got to be operationally executing, in a perfect fashion. And so for me, I was still very naive. My second year in F1, I enjoyed my time there. I really did, to be honest. I enjoyed that. But you could see where the racing component was. It was a bit clunky up top. It was a bit clunky up top in terms of getting into the bowels of the ship and understanding, coming from the Merck situation and coming from even the former 3000 teams and then Minardi. This was like, oh wow, this is corporate racing. But look, gave me a great chance to prove myself at the next level, working with good engineers, good people, and I enjoyed that time. But it was sort of I knew that I wanted more. For sure.
Yeah. And actually, just a thought, you've lived very close to where the team are based in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
So it was, actually, you were probably the most local Grand Prix driver for a race team in several years.
Yeah.
Most drivers sort of position themselves overseas.
They did, mate. Yeah, no, I was there for 03 and 04. I was 20 minutes from the factory. So, and no simulators back then, mate. Obviously, a lot of testing. So, but I think that was a good advantage, to be around, but not too much, obviously, because we still did a shitload of travel. But good times. The old Jackie Stewart Grand Prix facility, which is now, as you know, mate, Red Bull. So that location, as EJ's old factory is now Aston Martin. So that belt of racing, it's just extraordinary what the industry has done through that whole area there. And Jackie was the first, he pioneered that factory and that location, and then. And now Red Bull own the whole street, I think.
Yeah, they've got the Red Bull campus as Jaguar morphed into that. And we will get into that, Mark, when you come back to do what will be episode 2 of FFS and Mark Webber. Eddie, before we wrap it, have you got any other further thoughts on that first era for Mark in his racing career?
No, there's lots of things rushing through my head, which is maybe people don't know, which we want to hear Mark from. I want to hear about how he recovered and how he came back from that horrific bike accident in the winter time. Yeah. We love the little rugby stories, and I want to hear more about, and I think the anchors need to hear more about Campese, because they were at the initial years. Guys, Mark Webber, I can tell you as to the anchors, there are very few people in the world who would surpass Mark Webber as a person you'd want to go out and have a drink with, because he's an absolute joy, and his racing, you know, we can see it in him all the way through his life. He's fun. He's lucky for a reason. And the reason he's lucky is because he's a fucking top bloke.
Yep, I will absolutely second that. Mark is a class individual, and Mark.
Did you like that, Mark?
Thanks, mate. Thanks. I'm blushing, mate.
I wish you were sincere.
He goes and spoils everything, doesn't he? You go, EJ, you just can't help yourself. Well, Mark, I will wrap this up by
That's
saying...
been pre-recorded. Go again. We can do it again, EJ. Do it again.
No, this is being unedited and put in there so the anchors can hear exactly what EJ is like. Mark, I think you're a top man. It's always a pleasure to sit beside you. Thank you very much for coming on episode 1 of Mark Webber and FFS. And remember, for all of you listening, you can get in touch on social media at F1 for Success and send your questions in to ffs@whisper.tv. Mark, until next time, thank you very much. And unfortunately, I've got to hand over to the Irish Nutter to give his signature sign off. But before he does,
the anchors. Here we go.
Oh God, it's
Cheers,
just...
everybody. Thank you, Mark, in particular. And give our best love to Anne.
I will, mate. Yeah, good on you, buddy. Cheers.